All right, thank you very much, Steve, for that kind introduction. Tonight we're going to be talking about Social Security benefits, tips, and best practices. I'd like to start with talking about understanding Social Security benefits, and just an overview. Might be a repeat for some of you, but I think that it's important to talk about that, as we find at National Care Advisors that often some of our clients and individuals don't understand exactly what type of Social Security they're getting. We have a tendency to refer to Social Security as one big lump and not be specific about the program. And there are some very significant differences between the different types of benefits that can be obtained through the Social Security Administration. The four main types that we usually encounter are Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, Social Security Disability Income, which is commonly called SSDI, Retirement Social Security, and Dependent or Survivor Social Security. I also want to make sure that if nothing else, you leave with this website, the Social Security website information, which is www.ssa.gov. The Social Security Administration has done a good job of making this much more user-friendly and easy to navigate, and you'll find some very good information on this website. You can also open an account for yourself or for someone that you perhaps are representing, and you can find all kinds of specific information about your work history and what your benefits might be from Social Security through this website. I want to start by talking about Supplemental Security Income. There are two essential criteria. One is that the individual must meet criteria for the federal definition of disability. The definition, this is important, federal is the operative word here, because it doesn't matter if the individual thinks they're disabled or their family thinks they're disabled, or even if their doctor thinks they're disabled. It matters that they meet criteria for the federal definition of disability. The second criteria is that they must meet financial eligibility. The law, just let's talk about disability for a minute. The law defines disability as the inability to engage in any substantial gainful activity by reason of any medically determinable physical or mental impairment which can be expected to result in death, or which has lasted or can be expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months. You'll note the term substantial gainful activity. We often will have individuals who say, boy, I was turned down for Social Security, but I really can't work. The next question is, can't work at all or can't work in your original capacity? Substantial gainful activity, based on the federal definition, means that you can't work in any capacity, anywhere, and you cannot earn enough money to actually support yourself or meet the definition of substantial gainful activity. There are special rules for individuals who are blind, and so by definition, if an individual is defined as legally blind, they are going to automatically meet the definition of disability. We often get a question about, well, what about folks that are hearing impaired? As of today, our government does not recognize that as an automatic criteria for disability. There are some diagnoses that there's a list actually at the Social Security Administration of what are called presumptive diagnoses for disability. It's quite a long list, and on that list are things that just make common sense. So individuals with Down syndrome, individuals with autism, individuals with cerebral palsy, traumatic brain injury, those types of things, quadriplegia. Those kinds of diagnoses do fit a presumptive eligibility criteria. And so we often are able to kind of jump over some hoops quickly when we have medical documentation that supports one of those presumptive diagnoses. The financial criteria for Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, is that the individual must have less than $2,000 in resources, not counting the value of their primary residence or one vehicle. That $2,000 in resources, by that I mean in a bank account that is linked to their name, whether it's a savings or checking account, in any type of retirement account, 401k, those types of things, or even in a whole life policy if it has value. So technically the individual is not to have more than $2,000 in resources. And their income in 2017 may not exceed $1,130 a month. Income for purposes of SSI includes money that can be made from working, but also money that can be made from investments. It's important to understand that supplemental security for children with special needs has a few other criteria. One is that parental income is a factor until that child reaches age 18. So if mom and dad's income is over the threshold, then the child will not get SSI even if they meet the disability criteria. And that parental community support can be a factor in determining the amount of SSI benefit after age 18 if the individual is still living in the family home. And simply put is if mom and dad are providing all the housing, all of the utilities, all of the food, and the individual is receiving supplemental security income, that adult child over age 18, the Social Security Administration essentially is stating that, well, you don't really need all of your benefit, so we're going to decrease your benefit by a certain amount. Usually it's 1/3, if that's what is represented. We will often recommend that a parent should indeed charge their child rent after age 18 because there are expenses, living expenses, that can be paid through the Social Security system, and we don't want to see that 1/3 diminished amount for a benefit. So the application process. Well, we're almost paperless, but we're not really paperless. For SSI, it can be started online. It's a little confusing on the website, although there is a wonderful guideline about the documentation and the information that you need to collect prior to starting the application process. You can start it online. It's really important to fill out the entire application in detail. That means if they ask you for an address of a physician, you got to give them the address of the physician. If they ask for a previous employer, you need to give that detail. We often find that individuals are denied SSI benefit only because the application was not filled out completely. We also recommend that medical providers should be notified of the intent to apply for SSI because Social Security will go to those doctors' offices and ask for letters verifying impaired functional ability as well as medical documentation. It is helpful if the physician is aware and can write a letter substantiating based on functional ability that the individual is not capable of sustaining work. If you're assisting someone else to apply for Social Security or SSI benefit, it's really important that you submit a signed representative form. These forms are readily available on the website. I've given you the specific form number here. Once that either the individual who you're helping or their guardian or conservator has signed that form, then you'll be allowed to talk to the Social Security folks and the case managers and the intake individuals freely once you have that form on file. If you don't have that form on file and the individual you're trying to help is over age 18, our experience is that they're not going to talk to you at all. They're also not going to allow you to be involved in the application process or the interview process. If the individual that you're assisting to apply for SSI benefit is under a conservatorship protection or you're using a power of attorney documentation, make sure you have that documentation available to submit. And if you're having any trouble getting information or if the Social Security folks won't talk to you, we always say bring the individual with you or have them conferenced in on the phones to obtain the information that you need in order to help them clarify or obtain benefits. They will talk to you if that other individual is on the phone. So to maximize the supplemental security income benefit, oh, and I apologize, there's a typo here. For 2017, the full federal supplemental security income benefit for an individual is $738, not $735. It went up $3 as of January 1st, 2017. And for a couple, it probably went up about $6, but it's in the ballpark of $11.03 if I didn't get that right. I apologize, I didn't update my slides. As I mentioned earlier, by definition, supplemental security income benefits are to be used for essential housing, utilities, and food. You want to be able to document and demonstrate this use. As I mentioned, it's a full federal benefit of $738. So that's important to note, because if an individual is getting supplemental security income, they're not going to get one dime over $738 a month in 2017. It could be that they will get less if the Social Security Administration feels they're getting significant support from another resource, especially within their own home. So as I mentioned earlier, we recommend that when you are, in order to get that full benefit, you're going to want to demonstrate that the supplemental security income of $738 a month is essential for housing costs, whether that's rent or mortgage, property taxes, whatever that is, utilities, and food. The Social Security Administration does not care that you have other expenses for caregivers, or for incontinence supplies, or for therapy, or for any of those other, or a special camp. They don't care. SSI, by federal definition, is to be used for essential housing, utilities, and food. We have found that if a parent demonstrates that they are charging their child at least $600 a month in rent, there is a good chance that we will be able to retain the full SSI monthly benefit. There's also a California state supplement for SSI recipients, and for an individual, it's an additional $160.72 a month. For a couple, it's $407.14 a month. And that process comes along when you apply, when you successfully obtain SSI. 9 times out of 10, you'll also get the California state supplement, so be looking for it. So let's move on to Social Security Disability, SSDI. Again, you must meet that federal definition criteria for disability. But with Social Security Disability, it's based on how many work quarters and what your earnings have been that have actually been paid into the Social Security system. As I mentioned before, you can create an account on the Social Security SSA.gov website, and we can all do it. And you put in your Social Security number and a few other factors, and they will tell you exactly how many. You can see exactly what you paid into Social Security over your work history, and it will tell you what your SSDI or your disability benefit would be if you met the criteria for disability today. It'll also tell you what your retirement benefit would be. So there is an SSDI eligibility work test. So if you became disabled in or before the quarter you turned age 24, you have to have at least 1.5 years of work during this 3-year period ending with the quarter your disability began. In the quarter after you turn age 24, but before the quarter you turn age 31, you have to have worked at least half the time for the period beginning with the quarter after you turned 21 and ending with the quarter you became disabled. So, for those of you, even my saying it, it strikes me in my brain that, oh my gosh, how do I keep all that straight? And I took this straight off the website. What I would suggest to you is, our recommendation is, if in doubt, apply. There is no harm, there is no foul in applying. If you don't have enough quarters in, they will certainly tell you. They'll tell you in letter form why you're not eligible, and that can very well be one of the reasons, because you didn't have enough quarters in, or enough, you haven't paid in enough to receive Social Security disability. There's one other test, and that's in the quarter you turn age 31 or later, you have to have worked at least during the 5 years out of the 10-year period ending with the quarter your disability began. So again, yet another interesting requirement in order to get SSDI. We find that this is a problem most often with individuals who have left the workplace for a period of time, for example, to raise children, or they were unemployed and they unfortunately have now had an accident or some other reason why they now meet criteria for disability. and we find that they don't have enough work history to receive SSDI, even though they may have worked at other times in their adult life. So the average SSDI, Social Security Disability Benefit, is somewhere in the ballpark of $1,171 a month, but it varies widely based on the income paid into Social Security. The maximum SSDI benefit in 2017 is $2,687 per month. So that gives you a little ballpark about where most Social Security disability benefits come in. The $2,687 a month would be for a very high wage earner. We see individuals who are low wage earners. So, for example, they've worked perhaps at a fast food restaurant or at Walmart or someplace like that, or their work history is quite limited, and sometimes Social Security disability is below the SSI benefit of $738. It is possible to have both SSDI and SSI. We call that dual eligible, but if that is the case, you will max out at $738 per month. So let's talk a little bit about retirement Social Security. It's dependent on the age of retirement. And again, if you go out to your account at www.ssa.gov, or you go to view an individual you're trying to help account on www.ssa.gov, it will give very specifically what the amount for retirement Social Security will be based on the age of retirement, the age that you actually retire. And so unless you delay to after age 70, most of the maximum benefit is at 65 or 67.5, or the full age of retirement, again, today is $2,687. So for dependent and survivor Social Security benefits, I would have to say, again, our experience at National Care Advisors is that this is the most overlooked benefit, and we commonly find individuals that meet the disability criteria that have not fully tapped into Social Security benefits on the basis that they were a dependent child, a dependent adult child, or a surviving dependent adult disabled child of a parent that had a significant Social Security benefit. So what I'm talking about here is that if a parent is disabled and drawing Social Security, or a parent is deceased and they were eligible for Social Security benefits, that child can receive benefits through age 18 regardless if they're disabled. So again, with a deceased parent or with a disabled parent, the child can receive through age 18 a Social Security benefit. Widows with young children can receive through the youngest child reaching age 16. Our federal government apparently feels that moms can go back to work once their kids hit age 16, and they don't need to stay home anymore after that point. The child or the widow's benefit, again, if it's a disability situation, if someone within that family is receiving a benefit, it does not affect the disabled or the retired parent's benefit. Oh, I didn't mention that also. If there's an individual, if a parent is retired and receiving a benefit, then a child can also receive a benefit if they're either under age 18 or they're disabled. Also, it's really important to understand that a divorced spouse can receive benefits from their ex-spouse if they have not remarried. And so we often find that individuals are not aware of that as well. But the individual cannot receive benefits until that spouse starts drawing their own Social Security benefit, whether that's because of disability, retirement, or they become deceased. So if you kind of leave with nothing else besides the website that I've now talked about at least 3 times, I'd also like to leave you with what the health care benefits are linked to which Social Security program. So if you are eligible for, or someone that you love is eligible for SSI, Supplemental Security Income, they are going to be eligible for Medi-Cal, and that's by definition. And in every other state except California, it might be called Medicaid. So if you move somewhere else, it's Medicaid. Here in California, it's Medi-Cal. If you are receiving SSDI, so Social Security Disability Income, retirement benefits, or dependent benefits, you are eligible for Medicare. So as I was speaking before, say we have an individual who has, I'm going to just throw out an example. We have an individual who has a diagnosis of Down syndrome, and they lived with mom and dad their entire life. And mom and dad reached the age where they are drawing their own retirement Social Security benefit. Prior to mom and dad receiving their own Social Security retirement benefit, their adult dependent child was receiving supplemental security income and had access to Medi-Cal. At the point that mom and or dad start receiving their retirement Social Security benefit, their dependent adult child is now eligible for a boost up in their Social Security benefit from the parent's work history. And in today's world, they will also be eligible for Medicare. So that individual will get Social Security dependent benefit and Medicare, and they also, 9 times out of 10, will still be eligible for Medi-Cal unless their income is too high. It depends on that dependent benefit. Sometimes we end up having a share of cost because the dependent benefit is just slightly over the threshold for the Medi-Cal income eligibility limit. And that can be a little bit of a hassle because you feel like you're not getting anywhere. So tonight I wanted to talk a little bit about why folks have problems with Social Security and the Social Security Administration. And I didn't put this on a slide, but I'm going to tell you verbally that one of our internal recommendations is that we always use the mantra, middle of the day, middle of the week, middle of the month is the best time to go to any Social Security office anywhere, because you'll run into fewer crowds and less frazzled Social Security Administration workers. So middle of the day, middle of the week, middle of the month is the best time to approach Social Security if you found that you've been frustrated on other times. Another suggestion that we have is make an appointment. You can make an appointment online. You can even call and make an appointment, and they will honor those appointment times so you don't have to sit there all day. As I mentioned earlier, one of the #1 reasons why we find that an individual has been denied Social Security, whether it's supplemental security income or SSDI, is that it's an incomplete application and that they didn't fill out all the sections, or they left things blank and they didn't provide the required information. The second problem is that Social Security loves to send letters. They will send you a letter asking for additional information or documentation, and 9 times out of 10, it will have a deadline. You can call and get that deadline extended, but if you just ignore the letter, they're more than happy to say that you're not eligible for the benefit. Social Security also, generally every year, sometimes every 2 years, it's different based on the region, they will ask for updated information that you're still disabled or that you still meet the financial criteria. We realize that this is crazy frustrating if you have a child with cerebral palsy, that they're asking you every year if your child is still disabled. But by rules and by their procedure manual, they have the right to ask it. So it doesn't do any good to say this is ridiculous and not answer their request. All they'll do is cut off your benefits. So you need to answer the request and submit the required information. Same thing, if they're asking for financial criteria to justify your income or your bank account, you need to respond to that information, or they're likely to suspend your benefits. Another problem that we see is that sometimes the reported financial information is not as accurate as it probably should be. Please understand that the Internal Revenue Service cross-references with the Social Security Administration. It might take them a while to catch up, but at some point, if the IRS feels that you have some information, that you have a bank account, and you fail to reveal that to the folks at Social Security, eventually they will figure it out. We've even had them find whole life policies that the family had long since forgotten, and so we then have to, correct that issue, that there's a value in a whole life policy owned by an individual. It might only be, a $10,000 life insurance policy that someone took out when the individual was born, but it will be enough to skewer our Social Security benefit that we're trying to get. One of the other problems we often hear is individuals will say, I never got the letter. Really important that you keep your change of address updated and that you've got accurate information at the Social Security Administration. Again, we have the problem with supplemental security income. If you don't demonstrate that it's used for essential housing, utilities, and food costs, they will indeed take 1/3 away. And failure to provide pay stubs if the individual is working part-time or on a limited basis. And we frequently do have individuals who have developmental disability or other types of disability. They're not making a lot of money, but they are working. Those pay stubs have to be submitted, or Social Security will err on the side of cutting the benefit. They'll assume you're making more than you really are. So it's really important to provide those pay stubs. A bit of a hassle, but it's worth it if you can still get your full Social Security benefit. I wanted to talk a little bit about individuals who are disabled and working. There's a very specific guidebook called the Social Security Administration Red Book. If you Google it, it comes right up. It's a very good handbook. And there are special programs to allow individuals who have disability to work in the community but to not lose their benefit because they're earning slightly above the financial eligibility criteria. It allows for offsets for income for the cost of supportive services to enable work. So that means if the individual requires a job coach to be successful in their job, then the costs for paying that job coach or that aide can be taken away from the income that they are actually able to earn. Same with transportation costs, equipment costs. There's quite a list of things that can be taken as an offset to the income so that we don't lose benefits. And it's well worth it to understand that or to seek advice and counsel if you have an individual that you're working with that is disabled and you want to maintain their full Social Security and Medi-Cal benefit. So that's the end of my slides for now. I wanted to make sure that everyone has our information if you had any questions. We do have a support service that's Care Advisors Online, and you can have access to one of our very many skilled nurse case managers that kind of know Social Security and all types of third-party benefits, Regional Center, Medi-Cal, IHSS. We're very, very well versed on getting those types of benefits. Ellen, are there questions?
Yes, there are. Thank you very much, Ann. Okay, so I'm just going to go down the list. First one is, must the individual live in the USA full-time to enjoy benefits? My son will be 18, but we live in Thailand, where we are teachers. We are all U.S. citizens.
How old is the son?
It says will be 18.
And, wow. You stumped me on the first question. I believe, so if it was a Social Security retirement or disability question, I know the answer off the top of my head, and the answer is yes. You can certainly live out of the country and still draw a Social Security benefit. I believe if it's SSI, I do not believe that's possible, but I would need to double check on that. So I apologize. I do not know that answer right off the top of my head.
Okay, next one. I'm assisting a young lady. She's high-functioning autism, but psychiatrist has diagnosed with various mental disabilities, preventing her from being able to hold down a job. She was originally receiving SS benefits before she turned 18. She didn't follow through with her phone appointments and ultimately was denied further benefits. She didn't file for an appeal in time either. How long must she wait to reapply?
Oh boy, I didn't even talk about appeals. Okay. So generally our experience is that you can reapply within about 6 months. They'll allow you to reapply. And we often will take a look at someone who's been denied benefits for failure to show up for the interview or fill out the form or whatever the reason is. Generally speaking, across the country, if you appeal and you go through the entire appeals process, it can be up to and you have to get to a hearing. In some jurisdictions, it can be at least 2 years before you would get to a hearing process. We have found it's much more efficient to wait 6 months, reapply, have a professional assist with that application, make sure that there's a representative form filled out so that someone can accompany the individual to the interview and make sure that the evaluator totally understands what their functional ability is. And we've been very successful at getting Social Security, SSI or SSDI, depending on what they're eligible for, and getting that disability determination. It can be a challenge with individuals who are mentally ill and who do not acknowledge the fact that they have functional disability, in which case then it's extremely important that you have either a neuropsych evaluation, that you have copies of the individual education plan, the individualized education plan, and that you have other professional objective evaluations that this individual is not capable of sustaining employment. Sometimes with individuals who are mentally ill, they will do very well at the interview in convincing the individual that the evaluator that they don't really have a disability. And so we have had to work very hard in that arena sometimes to help the evaluator to understand that while the individual might be able to sustain an interview for 10 minutes, which is the average length of a Social Security evaluation, they probably are functionally way more disabled than what they present on that quick interview that is provided by Social Security. So to recap, I'm not a big fan of appeals unless we see, if we can look at the original application and it was filled out fully and everybody cooperated and all the information was put forth and the individual showed up for the review and we still don't understand why they were denied Social Security, then you may have no other recourse than to file an appeal and take it all the way up to hearing. But for our experience, we first want to rule out that there's not a quicker way, which is just to fill out the application and reapply and get it done in about 6 months.
Okay. Okay, next question. What is the name of the law or POMS regulation that keeps eligibility when a disability income comes from parents' retirement account and it is an amount over the SSI dollar amount? Pickle amendment, or do people who are disabled from birth lose benefits if a person's SSA income is very high?
Okay. Sounds like we have a little friend joining us there, and I'm not sure I caught all of that question. It sounded as if you were asking me.
I think the question here is about childhood disability benefits and how and many of the clients we work with, since we do so much work with folks with developmental disabilities, eventually they do end up on the childhood disability benefits. So I think that's where this question is going. So maybe you could go through that, and also you could also go through, if this is okay, what happens if the childhood disability benefits wipes out the SSI? Let's say it's greater than the amount. What does that do to our Medi-Cal eligibility?
So you're talking about Medi-Cal eligibility, or are you talking about SSI at this point? I guess I'm not clear on the question.
Well,
there was a question
what's
about
real common
the specific
with the clients,
POMs.
Yeah, what's very common with many of the clients we work with is their children will begin on SSI. and then eventually they'll go on childhood disability benefits, and it's not uncommon that the childhood disability benefits will be greater than the SSI, meaning there won't be any SSI.
Right.
And so what does that do to the Medi-Cal?
Well, again, there are Medi-Cal thresholds. There are income guidelines for Medi-Cal, and so there's usually what we see would be a share of cost or some type of a spend down in order so the individual would not necessarily lose all of their Medi-Cal, but there would be an amount that on every month that would have to be paid out of pocket before Medi-Cal would begin paying, and we do see that from time to time. And Steve, jump in here if you have any other experience that you can offer with that.
This is often misconstrued, and I'll tell you what, whoever the person is who's asking the question, I'll post the answer to the list, but you can also email me at steve@dalelawfirm.com. And, the question also involves what's called the Pickle Amendment, and this stuff gets pretty wonky, but what happens if you start off as SSI eligible and if the reason that you get knocked off is because of the childhood disability benefits, you do get to keep your Medi-Cal, at least in California, without a share of cost. The other reference in this question is to the Pickle Amendment, and what the Pickle Amendment has to do is if you were on SSI, and let's say you were getting a lesser amount of childhood disability benefits, and because of cost of living adjustments, it drops you off of benefits. The Pickle Amendment lets you keep your SSI, and it's named after a law passed by a guy named Jake Pickle in Texas. So there are some good things that come out of Texas here. Excuse that. The effect is the same, but I see this missed by a lot of eligibility workers, and so if anyone is having a problem with that, I'm happy to send the site to you. So, which kind of demonstrates how difficult our rules are and sometimes how complicated they are. Ellen, before we get to the next question, there was something that I answered offline, but I think it's good for other folks to understand that. And the question was basically one of the folks here was under the impression that there is a dollar limit of the value of an automobile that you can own. And can you go a little bit over eligibility as far as vehicles and what you can own, and is there a dollar amount?
Do you want me to?
Well, I would say that certainly comes up, and I don't have. In our practical experience, I don't remember ever being asked specifically what the dollar amount, on a vehicle, because that's a moving target, basically on what a vehicle is worth. Definitely, if you own more than one vehicle, you've got a problem. Sometimes, too, we'll hear that, there's a household limit. Well, again, in different states, as far as the value of your house as well, in different states that for different programs that certainly can come into play where there is a defined dollar amount on a house or on a car. Even though there might be, and Steve, you may know this off the top of your head. I don't know it because we don't really run into it on a practical basis hardly ever. I can't even remember in the last 20 years where we've ever been asked what kind of car the individual has. We've had folks that have been caught up with having more than one car.
To give the answer, in 2005 they changed it, and even before 2005, I never had a case where they lost eligibility because of the value of the car. As of 2005, there's no limit on the value of the car. So you could conceivably have a Tesla, although how you're going to maintain that on SSI, I don't know. But there's no limit. And actually, at the same time, there used to be that if you provided clothing, they would reduce your benefits, and that went away in 2005. The only other thing with cars I might mention, and kind of alluded to this, it's one car per person or couple that's on SSI, and I see a common mistake. And hey, as Californians, we ought to have that car, right? Well, the problem is a couple on SSI can only have one vehicle. And if they have a second vehicle, that's counted towards the $2,000, or if it's a couple, $3,000 resource limitation. So I guess we're getting a little
they will, yeah, they will cross-reference with the title company. So I'm sorry, with the registration from the state. So we have seen that where folks have gotten caught up in that. And also, it doesn't necessarily matter. Like, for example, is the vehicle on the road? That I get that question a lot. Well, we have one vehicle, but it's a historic vehicle. It only sits in our garage, and we don't really use it. Yeah, no, it can still be a problem for SSI for sure.
Okay, well, let's continue to plow through some of these things here.
Okay, so another question. If a child who has been abled since early childhood but is now 18 years old, is SSDI important, or would you just focus on SSI?
So as I mentioned, if the child doesn't have a retired, disabled, or deceased parent who's drawing their own Social Security benefit, obviously if they're deceased they're not drawing a benefit, but if they're retired or disabled, then the child has been disabled since childhood and has no work history, SSDI won't even be a factor. The only thing they'll be eligible for is SSI and perhaps the state supplement. It's when you go to apply at Social Security, generally speaking, they will do a search for you to see if there's any other benefit that you're that the individual is eligible to receive. So we sometimes will ask that question if we get an unfavorable response and we thought that they should be eligible for SSDI. But generally speaking, we find that the intake workers are quite good at, when they do a search, they're going to look for any other benefits that they might be eligible to receive. When I mentioned that sometimes we miss a benefit, it's because the parent themselves started drawing their retirement, they had a disabled dependent child, or they became disabled and they didn't know that they needed to go back into Social Security to apply on behalf of their child for that additional benefit above and beyond the SSI that they might have been receiving. So my guess is, for this question, when that application is made, it will come back that the child after age 18 is only eligible for SSI if mom and dad are not disabled or retired or deceased.
Okay, what is the maximum salary a widow with a minor can earn and still qualify for survivor benefits?
I would have to look that up. You're stumping me. So the maximum that a widow can earn, and you've got a minor child, so the minor child's going to be eligible for a benefit based on the deceased parent's work history. So that child is going to be eligible regardless. I would need to double check. I would suggest that you go in and apply regardless. You've got no harm, no foul in applying.
Okay. Next question. Can you tell us about the Ticket to Work program? Is it new?
No. Ticket to Work has been around
forever.
Yeah. Forever. At least.
What?
Oh my gosh, I'm revealing my age.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's at least 25 years, I think Ticket to Work has been around. It's part of the Red Book, and it is a program that is incented to assist individuals who have special needs to return to the workplace. And if it's done right, you need to do some proactive work before they're hired with the employer who is offering them employment, and it will allow that individual to keep their benefits, especially insurance, Medicaid, Medi-Cal, while they're still working until they've proven the point where they can earn enough to get off benefits, that they're no longer financially eligible.
Let me make a suggestion for that question specifically, and I think that, Ellen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the last webinar we did was with the disabilitybenefits101.org website. The best place to find that. And I'm going to give you folks the long name and then write down the short name. Is to go to disabilitybenefits101.org or db101.org. The ticket to work, and that's a subject that would take a whole hour in itself.
Yeah, it's a complex
Here is
program.
one of about 4 major work incentive programs that helps a person on SSI or on benefits be able to work and eventually transition off of benefits. The absolute best place to go, no matter where you are in the country, to learn about that is disabilitybenefits101.org or db101.org. And I know we have a number of professionals on the line here. You should absolutely bookmark that. I doubt if there's 2 or 3 days that go by that I don't look this up. As in, it's not possible for Ann to memorize each and every part of this. I couldn't possibly memorize all of that, but it's a really good way to go.
Right. I would also suggest some other resources if you're interested in those types of situations where you really want someone to, an individual with special needs to, enter the workforce. Obviously, the regional center is a good place to start, and you often find a vocational specialist at the regional center that can help you through that process. If the match is found with a mainstream employer and the individual is likely to start earning some good wages, oftentimes we have found that there is a vocational specialist at the regional center that can help. Also, the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, no matter what state you're in, also you might have to do a lot of calling to get someone who has time to answer your question, but they're quite knowledgeable about it once you get to the right person. So, next question.
Okay, so how much money can a person on SSI work in the community before they would lose their SSI benefits?
The income threshold is $1,130. However, there will be a decrease once they're over a certain threshold. Once up to that $1,130, there may be a dollar for dollar decrease in their benefit depending on what they're making. So the definitive number is the $1,130 that was on my earlier slide.
Right, and once again, for whoever the person is who asked that question, go to disabilitybenefits101.org, and once again we just did a webinar on this. And I mean, these are good questions because working oftentimes is the avenue to real independence, and there are trial work periods and all sorts of stuff, and if we had an extra hour and a half, we could jump into it. Otherwise, if you go back to our playlists, the last program we did was directly on that subject here, and it's a pretty involved subject. I know that we have a number of questions having to do with housing here and how that affects benefits. So I know one of the questions here is if somebody's on SSDI, does it matter reporting the housing here?
Not at all. SSDI, Social Security Disability, is not at all means tested. So Donald Trump, if he got hit by a car tomorrow, will receive Social Security Disability. There is absolutely no means test. You can have a big house, you can have a big car, you can make all kinds of money, both earned and unearned. Social Security Disability, the only criteria is that you must be disabled.
Okay. Next question. My nephew is severely autistic, and he was approved for a caregiver being paid by in-home support. If he started getting SSI, would that income affect him qualifying for IHSS or even his Medi-Cal? Both him and his mother are on Medi-Cal now.
The question to that is, first of all, how old is he? And second of all, is his mother going to be on salary as his IHSS worker? So the question is maybe, because there may be some some issues. Oh, I take that back. Wait a minute. How old is he? I guess I should say how old is he. So if he's under age 18 and his mother all of a sudden is paid through the IHSS system, that will be counted as income. And as I previously said, if he's under age 18, parental income is a factor in eligibility of SSI. If he's over age 18, it should not be a factor.
Okay. My son is receiving SSI due to mental illness, and he moved in with us. You mentioned about charging rent or board and care expense. What is reasonable, as our essential expense may exceed $1,000 for mortgage, utilities, etc.?
Based on our experience, if the parent goes in, and they're not going to ask you for formal documentation on this, by the way, based on our experience. We have had significant success in having a parent just jot down on a piece of paper, okay, here's what my mortgage is, here's what my utilities are, here's what my property taxes are, homeowner's insurance, and my food. Divide by the number of people in the home, and then you can easily, it's a rare household that can't get to $600. And so if you represent that you're going to charge your child $600 a month out of their SSI for essential housing, food, and utilities, it's highly probable that they will not decrease you by the 1/3 because you need that money for their living expenses. Now, it's important that if you represent that, you actually have to take the rent from the child. So you want to show every month that when that SSI check comes in, it's electronically deposited, that you're moving at least $600 out of the account to, for those purposes. Once it's in the parent's, once that money's been moved over to the parent or whoever they're living with, at that point they can use the money any way they want. It's their money.
And I'll mention this, for those of you, housing is a huge, huge issue, and I see there's many questions about housing, and we're not going to be able to get through them all tonight. If you go back to the YouTube channel, there's a playlist on housing where that is all laid out, and I'll tell you, it gets very confusing here, and my experience has been the same with Ann's. In a lot of cases, if you present them with a reasonable information, they're likely to not charge the reduction in benefits, but there's some situations where I think the ISM reduction which is the 1/3 reduction for rent, is one of the stupidest things that I can think of in the SSI regs. And the housing in California is so high. There's a lot of people that end up taking the reduction anyway. There was one question in here that maybe we can jump into real quick. Is somebody was asking, well, is there a way here, because housing is so high here, to get around the ISM reduction thing? And one of the things that, once again, if you go back to our YouTube channel and our playlist, one of the new tools is if your child could show that they were disabled before the age of 26, you can actually use an ABLE account to get around it in a pretty wonky, crazy, I'm not supposed to say that word, in a pretty wonky, hard to understand process, but it actually works. Once again, that just kind of illustrates how involved these benefit programs are. And this is where, trying to get some assistance can be really good. I think we could take about 2 more questions, and I know I could just tell by the volume of questions here that we could do this all night long, but Mrs. Dale has dinner for me, so I've got to eat eventually, okay? So
I wanted to just kind of jump in real quick, too, that for ISM, what we have found, too, is that it's very subjective. We would like to think that the Social Security Administration is the same all over, and obviously we do see some variations sometimes in the decisions. There is some subjectivity, especially to ISM. And so we have had some success that if the first time you end up having the 1/3 deduction, go ahead and try next time that you have an opportunity to talk to the Social Security Administration. Go in well-armed again, and see if you don't get someone else who's a little more sympathetic. I hate to say that, but that is the reality. It is subjective.
Okay, so I'm just kind of going through here and seeing what we can see what we can talk about that we haven't. Here's one on when I start receiving Social Security retirement benefit at, say, 62 and a half, or full retirement at 67. What is the change to dependent benefit? Is it better than the SSI benefit?
Good question.
That's a great
What do you think,
question. I think the answer is that the dependent benefit stays the same. That's what I think. I might be wrong. Am I wrong?
Well, here's what happens under the there's different terms for it, but the childhood disability benefits, which the child, if they were disabled before the age of 22. So for those of you that have loved ones with developmental disabilities, that's real easy because by definition it's before the age of 18. Your child will get an amount equal to half of what you would get. So if you were getting $1,000 a month, your child would get $500 a month. When you pass away, the child would get 3/4. Now, one of the advantages of Social Security disability is there's no food or shelter limitations. The rules are much easier. So, for instance, I'm working with a family right now where I think the father is probably going to go take his Social Security quicker, basically, to get his kid out from underneath the SSI rules, which are a lot more onerous. Now, the other issue is that 2 years after starting to get the childhood disability benefits, the child will get Medicare. Now, for some folks, Medicare will cover all the expenses, but for instance, for a lot of folks that are on getting attendant care, IHSS, and that kind of thing, you want to keep your Medi-Cal eligibility. So, once again, this is where we were talking about where you want to make sure that there's someone who's guiding you who knows what they're doing, because ideally we want them to be many, get both of the different programs, and you can actually get the best of all worlds. So the nice thing about the Social Security, the childhood disability benefits, is it's really hard to goof it up. You'd have to work really hard. With SSI, there are so many rules and it's so complicated here, and there's so many pitfalls that, once again, you really have to watch yourself. The only issue really for folks that are on childhood disability benefits is, do you still meet the definition of disability? Okay, so
and I would add to that that's it's a good question for your financial planner. So if you're deciding, should I wait till I'm 67, should I start at 62, should I wait till I'm 70, the factor that you've got a dependent child that's going to get a bump up in their Social Security benefit is pretty significant, and it might make a difference overall, again, depending on health and all the other rationale that a financial planner can tell you quite easily, of whether you should start drawing at 62.5 or start at 67.5 or wait till 70. That is definitely a question that a financial planner can help you through relative to the best time, and do some actual modeling of what does that look like, assuming a given life expectancy. Is it a better deal for your family, for your dependent, to have that additional benefit and for you to start drawing your benefits sooner?
Ellen, last question. It's your pick.
Okay. I really have maybe just about two. Can we just cover the two?
Why don't we do that, and then I have one last thing, and then I smell meatloaf, so it's time.
Let's just do the two that I'm seeing here, because I think we can get through these. Okay. So my son is disabled and recently converted from receiving SSI Medi-Cal to SSDI as a surviving disabled dependent of his deceased father. At the time he qualified for SSDI, he qualified for Medicare, and now has Medicare, Medi-Cal, and Contra Costa County Health Care. I have not had to provide financial info yet for SSDI. When I report housing, can I include homeowners insurance?
Okay. So the answer to that is that you will not have to, you will not be required for any type of financial reporting for that dependent benefit that your son is now getting. Remember that the dependent benefit is not means tested. So there is no income and there is no asset test, and there will be no 1/3 deduction. You're not at any risk for that Social Security dependent benefit that he's receiving. That is not even a worry. And if he's already he's dual, what we call dual eligible, or Medi-Medi, is what Steve was just talking about. There is a likelihood that the folks from Medi-Cal may ask you for income information, but that will only be, what you'll do is you'll show them the Social Security dependent income, and then some of those other factors that Steve was mentioning relative to the, some of those other statutes might come into play depending on how high that benefit is. But Steve, you need to jump in there.
So, once again, that kind of illustrates you'd have to work really hard to goof this up here.
Yeah.
And the only thing you'd have to be careful about is any income outside of the benefits for the Medi-Cal, which is what pays for the IHSS. And and for many of our clients, and I know there's many professionals here that are listening, many of the folks we work with, eventually they're going to end up on childhood disability benefits, and so this is something you should really have a handle on. In fact, we do so much planning where we get all wound up about SSI for when the parent passes away, and then it turns out, well, they're not going to be on SSI anyway. They're going to be on a different set of rules. It doesn't mean that we don't need to pay attention to the rules. It just actually gets easier, and sometimes that happens.
Right. That's actually, you've got a wonderful configuration of benefits, and again, you're not going to have much of a hassle from anyone from this point forward.
Okay, the last question. If a disabled adult living at home has been approved for SSI benefits, but the parents have not been charging the child rent up to the point of approval, can the parents begin doing so and then request an increase in the benefit up to the maximum amount?
Yes, and in fact, it's kind of nice sometimes to demonstrate that when you go in and ask for that. Don't expect that they're going to go back retrospectively, though, and increase your amount. I have not seen that when that decrease, that 1/3 deeming has been applied. But sure, there's no harm in starting right away, taking the rent, and then being very clear about what that's for. And then, within a couple months, going into the Social Security office with your documentation and saying, hey, he's an adult. We need his support in order to continue to keep him living in our home. Here's what his share is, and we would like to respectfully request that you increase our SSI to the full amount.
Great. Well, I know we probably do this all evening long, but just a couple of things just in closing, and then maybe you could tell us a little bit more about National Care Advisors here. But these rules aren't easy to navigate, and once again, I know for myself, I do a lot of benefits-related work, but I've called on National Care Advisors. We get emails on almost a daily basis. And, this is one unique thing that National Care Advisors does in their services, which is help on eligibility issues. And so, once again, I can, just from personal experiences, I think that, they've been a great asset to, one, the Dale Law Firm and also the Golden State Pool Trust. And once again, I think we're always working a couple of cases through. Ann, do you have any last statements or any last advice or that kind of thing?
Well, again, I can't say loud enough. If in doubt, apply. There is no harm. There's no foul. There's nothing. Nothing says that if you got turned down once, you're not going to be successful the next time. If you do need support and you have questions about the application process, we offer a very low-cost access to our care consultants, and all of our care consultants are registered nurses. They're special needs consultants. This is all we do. We have several here in California, and so you can access us online. You can schedule an appointment and spend an hour with us, and we'll help you fill out the form if you'd like us to. If you need more help and you'd like us to go to the Social Security office with you or to really take over the process, more than happy to do that, and we would talk about an individualized service plan then based on your actual goals and objectives and what you would like us to assist you to accomplish. So we're here for you, just as Steve is, and we really appreciate the opportunity to help everybody get to the best possible quality life that they can.
And one last question, and then it really is meatloaf time here, which is, and we're very California-centric here, but my understanding is there is life beyond California, and I know we have folks that are watching here from other states. So what areas do you serve?
We serve all 50 states. In fact, Alaska and Hawaii we have had cases in as well. So we are more than happy and knowledgeable in all states. We have as I said, we have a troop of the nurse consultants, and we have an education consultant on staff as well. There's a reason why we're called National Care Advisors. So feel free. If we don't know the answer, we probably know someone who does know the answer, and that's one of the reasons why we look for trusted associates like Steve. But we indeed serve the entire nation, and we can be extremely useful if you're moving from one location to another within the United States, because as you are all aware, while SSI and SSDI and Social Security is federal, Medicaid, Medi-Cal, and developmental disability services are incredibly regional. And so it's very important that if you are anticipating a move from one state to another, that you might want to have some guidance and that you go in with your eyes wide open about the differences between our various states.
Okay, I want to thank you so much. And once again, I'll try to post when we put this up on the YouTube channel, I'll try to post the link to the question about the pickle and the continuation of Medi-Cal or Medicaid here once you transition from SSI onto the childhood disability benefits. Thank you very much. And the other question is, if you would like my wife's meatloaf recipe, you can email me off list. It's a very delicious meatloaf. With that, thank you very much, and that will bring us to a close here. And Ellen is working on a new set of programs. If there's something you would like to hear about, you can always email Ellen at ellen@dalelawfirm.com here. And if she finds it interesting, she'll find a speaker for you, okay? Ann and Ellen, have a good evening, and to everybody else here, have a good evening, and let's help folks with disabilities have the best quality of life possible.